Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are with,
Afternoon.
with
It's like
Tim
10 o'clock in the morning. What are you talking about?
Ah, man, you know what? I'm so used to running this webinar in the afternoon. Just because it shows you how crazy things are. Like, just gonna go ahead and do some more coffee here, Tim, if you want to just take over.
Wait a minute. I'm like double fisted.
Uh, how do you know
Always
you're
gonna
an
have my iced coffee.
How do you know you're an entrepreneur? How many coffee cups are on your desk?
Yeah, Maureen yelled up to me this morning and was like, "Bring down all your dishes. I'm running the dishwasher." And I'm like, if I bring 2 down, can I bring 2 up or just 1?
I actually had to get a water fountain going by my office because I moved home, and so I hooked up a fridge, tapped a line, and got everything going so that I could get ice and water really quickly in between meetings. And I've got my emergency Nespresso over here, so if I don't have time to go get some coffee upstairs, I can just go over here, grab a cup, have it pour out, and I'm ready to go.
Awesome.
So, welcome to the webinar today. Sorry, everyone. This is the first time I've done a LinkedIn webinar, exclusive webinar. So getting the link and getting the emails out was a pain in the butt compared to Zoom. So everyone give some comments in the comment section. Skip's going to be kind of managing all that. Looking forward to having a great conversation about something that came up with me and a client recently was willful negligence. And I thought, who knows more about compliance and willful negligence than Mr. Tim Golden over at Compliance Scorecard? So, Tim, give us a little bit introduction of who you are, why we should know you, and the awesomeness that you bring to the table.
Yeah, Adam, and thanks so much for that. And, thanks for putting this together. As we dive into this conversation, I'm really excited to start talking about, the risks that MSP owns and kind of how the, potential negligence or even ignorance in that as we move forward. But anyways, I'm Tim Golden, founder of the newly rebranded Compliance Scorecard, where we help MSPs generate the scorecards around governance, risk, and compliance for you and your customers to have the risk conversation and to be able to help identify those areas of risks, help mitigate and the process and management around those risks, and to be able to present them with fun little scorecards that are easy for them to interpret and easy for you to be able to have that conversation.
Oh, go ahead.
If I can mention this, Adam, we're really excited because now with Humanize IT and their platform and their vCISO SaaS application, we'll be working towards putting those actionable scorecards into your quarterly business reviews.
Yep. We're trying to kick off a concept called quarterly risk review. So when you want to focus on compliance or when you
QRR, new acronym.
A new acronym. Everybody wants another acronym to put in their toolkit, a quarterly risk review where you look at the holistic, what's going on at the business, because risk is bigger than just technology. And that's part of the why you do compliance. If you run any kind of compliance framework, you'll find very quickly that this expands way beyond just technology. And so we want to make sure that your clients are taking care of this and that they're aware and they're being held accountable. And that is the key piece to compliance. It's easy to get a SOC 2 and say you do things. It's hard to get a SOC 2 type 2 and prove that you're doing things.
Exactly.
So, Tim, let's do a little bit of a breakdown here. Like right now, the reason why this is a big problem is that people are finding out that willful negligence is something in the legal world where you may say, hey, I'm compliant, but then you're not following your own security practices. Your client says, we won't worry about 2-factor. We won't worry about doing phishing, tests. And then all of a sudden, one of your employees sends $10,000 to a known actor and the cybersecurity insurance won't cover you. Why won't they cover you, Tim?
Well, because you either haven't said what you're doing, or maybe you have said what you're doing and you haven't actually included the customer in that conversation. Because in facilitating this work as the IT professional, as the MSP, you may or may not know best, right? I know we talked, the word here today is negligence, but I
Mhm.
also want to introduce the word ignorance, which feels a little harsh, but we don't know what we don't know, right? And so, as an SMB customer, being a former MSP, we are making the assumption like, I got an IT guy, they take care of that. I got a lawyer, I got a doctor, I got a plumber, I got a whatever, insert professionals as we are to take care of that. Well, then the assumption is then on that professional, on that MSP, IT service provider, VCSO, what are we doing in those services? And are we really discussing that risk? Are we really helping to mitigate that risk? Are we uninformed about that risk? Or are we just reselling a bunch of tools and maybe trying to break into that BCSO space? So
Yeah.
negligence has a extremely strong connotation, as does ignorance. The two kind of go hand in hand. Either I don't know about a thing, or I actually know about a thing, but I'm not doing anything about it. Right.
Correct.
I think that's kind of where this conversation is stemming from is I've been telling them 2FA, maybe over an email, that they've ignored. I've been telling them X, Y, and Z, and they haven't had a process in place for ensuring that the customer is informed and
Yep.
ensuring that the customer is making the business decisions around that.
Yeah, and I've been in the room where somebody has said, "Well, if we don't know, then we can claim ignorance," right? Is this still
Right.
the case?
Is that what presidents say on the whole plausible deniability? I don't
Exactly,
know.
and this is like
And politicians.
CEOs and CIOs have said these words to me as a CISO. Like, if we don't know, so if we don't worry about, logging or blah, 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 then we're good. We just have to be just as aware as the person next to us, right? And I didn't know how to respond to that in the moment, but
Well, here's the thing, right? Because I've run into it myself a few times when I was at the MSP where the client didn't know a thing, and I think that's a kind of our job a little bit as the IT professional around helping to educate our customers. There was a good friend of ours, Jesse Miller, on one of his LinkedIn posts a couple days ago or a week ago, whatever it was made a really great analogy of and I'll have to find it, but it was along the lines of just because I didn't know doesn't mean I'm not held accountable,
yeah.
right? Like, for example, I didn't know that bad things were happening on the shop floor, or I chose to put blinders on, right? And didn't chose or see the bad thing happening on the shop floor and somebody got their hand cut off, or an accident happened, right?
Yep.
Which all boils back to insurance, right? Insurance, looking at the things of claims and incidents and all that fun stuff, like the defensibility around I didn't know isn't really a strong defense. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but chances are I didn't know doesn't feel like a strong defense.
Yeah. If you tell your kids, like, "Don't do this thing," and "Oh, yeah, I won't do that," and then they ended up like, "And that's why we don't do this." It hurts.
Mhm. Right.
And, for me, it's the cybersecurity insurance part. You're
Yep.
promising a third party, you're deferring risk to this third party, and you're promising them, "We do these things." And that third party says, "I will cover you if crap happens." And what people are finding out is that the cybersecurity insurance people aren't covering them. And when you dig into this, you find out why. And they have good reason. Yes, they're insurance people. They're going to wheedle their way out of it. But that's why you
Mhm.
need compliance. That's why you need to be on top of this stuff. When I was in as a CISO, when I was as a director of security, I had to worry about this stuff, and I had to convince my employees. I had to convince different departments. We need to be doing this so that we can cover ourselves if bad things happen. And it's hard. It's We had an entire compliance department that worked alongside the cybersecurity department. We did not report to the same person.
Hmm.
And that's how complicated this was. That's how hard it was. Like you had to have a department, and this is not a big company, just to manage compliance. Now, given we were a critical infrastructure, so there was multiple areas of compliance to manage, but it was all very complicated. You couldn't just say, "Hey, I am a CISO. I can just handle the policy generation."
Hmm.
Anybody who's been through policy generation and been through an office of a CISO understands that there is way more than just auditing when it comes to compliance. And that's why I
Yeah.
really love what Tim's doing, is because he's taking it seriously and he's building something that's actually useful that your clients can actually understand. Say, oh, that's why I should care.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I say you hear me on most of the webinars talk about the why behind the thing, right? And so, facilitating that why conversation with your client, I get it. I was an IT guy for years. I never wanted to talk to the human. I only wanted to talk to the computer. But
Yeah.
as our friend Wes and others in empath cyber have started to educate on, like, we are the cyber professionals. We know the ones and zeros, but the relational side and the why side, for us to be staying competitive in this marketplace, we need to start to pivot and have those hard conversations, but it
Yep.
doesn't have to be hard, right? My first always suggestion is start with yourself, right? Even if you're a solopreneur as an MSP, or you have just
Yep.
2 or 3 people as an MSP, you know have a champion, have somebody that's accountable and responsible for working a process, and then
Yes.
work that process internally, right?
Get to
Learn.
know it.
Yeah, learn your skills and hone that conversation so that when you are sitting in front of your client during your QRR, it's a little more comfortable, right?
Yep.
And the more you do these things, the more comfortable you'll get.
Yeah, I worked at a very large corporation and we did NIST cybersecurity because we were a government contractor. And we locked like 8 of our best engineers in a room, gave us a pile of breakfast burritos, and we had basically a week to prove and do evidence gathering and do our self-assessment. And I
Mm.
learned more in that 1 week stuck in the room with those other engineers. I mean, you're talking like a conference room where it's starting to stink in there by the end. you know, we're all like on our like 5th day of 12 hours of evidence gathering, going to firewall, screenshotting, building documentation, proving that we're doing what we're doing. I learned more in that week than I did in my CISSP conversations and my time as a CISO, all these things. I
You've
learned more through
you
the application of the NIST framework and actually proving, not auditing, proving that we were doing what we said than
right.
anything else I had done in my career.
Well, and that's part of the challenge. So first I want to, like, you had 12 people in a room going through what, NIST 853, if I had to
Yep.
guess. Yeah, I did it by myself back in what, 2007ish, right? Um, and yeah, it can be scary, and yeah, it may be hard, but it doesn't have to be.
Correct.
Like in 2007, 8, 9, 10, like GRC wasn't even a word in a sense from an MSP perspective. Now there were and there are still some really great MSPs and SSPs that have been, eyeball deep in this. But for
Yeah.
the vast majority of the what, 40 some odd thousand MSPs in the United States alone, wasn't even on their radar. And so as we started to look into that, and I started to write my own tools to gather evidence, prove stuff, actually govern things. And oh, wait, NIST just came out with a new governed domain. As I started to do this for myself, I needed to be able to gain some efficiencies in that because, I was by myself. Yes, I had a couple of technicians that could work alongside me, but as the CIO, CTO, see everything it kind of rested on my shoulders to work through that audit, through that authorization to operate, through that attestation and self-assessment.
Yeah.
Um, Fast forward, here we are, 2024. GRC is a common word, at least, and there are a plethora of tools that can help. Some of them do it way better than others.
Yeah, and you have to remember, like, a lot of MSPs will tell me, like, "Well, my client just won't listen to me."
Mm,
Why isn't my client listening to me? They need to do two-factor. They need to do phishing. They need to do, and they have all these things that they say, "I need to get my client," but they just won't listen to me. What do I do about this? And some MSPs are like, "You know what? I'm just gonna fire my client." Some MSPs like, "Well, I can't afford to fire my client." And
mhm.
there's all these questions that go, why do MSPs own the risk here? Like, why don't I just defer the risk onto my client? So, Tim, can you answer the question? Why do MSPs own the risk here? Why should they care about communicating effectively to their
Yeah.
client?
So we were talking about this on Team Tim not too long ago, and I had a little bit of a, I don't want to say an angry rant. It's on my YouTube. You can go find it at Compliance Scorecard's YouTube channel. But the long and the short of it is, MSPs, starting right at the very beginning with your MSA, your agreement, right? Outlining, and this is where Brad Gross and Eric Tildes and other legal people in the space can help you define your MSA. So, explicitly what you are doing, and then even more so, explicitly what you are not doing. From there, developing a process for identifying key areas of risk. Yeah, do a gap analysis or do an evaluation or a security risk assessment. You do a thing against a thing. And since we mentioned insurance, we'll just pick on the 4 or 5 things that insurance asks for, right?
Okay.
Backup, 2FA, security awareness training, next gen AV, right? There's just a couple of items that cyber insurance are starting to ask for and have been for the last couple of years. Start there, simple 5 questions, right? And then being able to present that to your customer alongside, hey, we've identified these areas of risk during your QRR or whatever. What do you want to do about them? And so what we have seen is clients tend to either ignore them or don't want to do them, or they do. Yay, now we can generate some more MRR and project work or something because
Yep.
they want to do a thing. They've recognized, oh, yeah, you're right. You're going to save my wallet on insurance rates, most likely, and you're going to make me better protected. And
Yep.
so, conversely, what doesn't happen is we communicate, we're throwing spaghetti at the wall to our customer, and they are not accepting or that risk or transferring that risk or sharing that risk alongside us.
Correct.
We've told them, okay, what, how? By an email, carrier pigeon, tin can and string? I don't know. And they have either not responded. There's no accountability there, right? We've told them, it's like, yelling at the wall and no one responds. But having a mechanism in place like a risk register to be able to allow your customer to say, I don't want to do it. And then the audit trail and the accountability behind, I don't want to do the thing. Okay, as an MSP, our MSA says everybody gets 2-factor everywhere possible. We present that to our customer, and our customer says no. What is our option? Fire the customer, put it on a risk register, and hold them accountable. Now you've started to either share that risk or transfer that risk back to your customer. So things like a risk register. And it doesn't have to be complex. There's plenty of templates on the internet, or you can use Compliance Scorecard to manage that. Doesn't matter. Having a list of things and having accountability, signature things from your clients, something that can be auditable and proving they chose not to do it. And here's where they sign the document.
Yeah.
That's, so we own the risk because we're not either sharing or transferring that risk to our customer. And we're not holding our customer accountable to that risk. And then insurance comes in and says, hey, you're culpable too, because there's no documentation, there's no trail, there's no nothing to prove you told them, you told them, you told them.
Yep.
Maybe you could gather emails and stuff like that, but yeah, that's really the big thing, is about working alongside your customer and having them also be accountable for their risk.
And this is becoming a bigger and bigger thing as cybersecurity matures. And I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I'm not trying to be a what do you call it? Yeah, not trying to put fear in you.
Fun
What I'm trying
factor.
to point out is like you buy a house and you have to go through an audit to buy a house. And
Yeah.
so that your customer, so your bank knows that, hey, this house is sound. It's not going to burn down in 2 years. It's not going to have some major issues that we're going to have to cover in a couple of years. And so, as Richard Lepek is pointing out, auditors and financial institutions are starting to ask about cybersecurity because you can disappear overnight if you have a very large cyber breach. And it's becoming this thing where financial institutions are tired of taking on this liability. And then you, as an MSP, need to point out, like, look, you wouldn't buy a house without having it audited, without having somebody go in and inspect it. Your business is the same way. That's why you have a SOC 2. That's why you have things like compliance initiatives. This is why the credit card companies came up with PCI. PCI wasn't a government thing. It was a credit card thing. They wanted to make sure that people weren't doing stupid stuff with their money.
Even so, like the SEC, the whole K-8 filings, right? So as a publicly traded company, being able to conduct your K-8 filings and understanding the requirements, and actually having somebody of authority and accountability attesting to that,
Yes.
right? And I keep an eye a little bit on the K-8 stuff as it relates to financial institutions, as it relates to publicly traded companies. And the number of ones that come in day after day after day that don't have the things in place that they probably should be having in place. It's really interesting to watch. If you haven't set up a Google alert for K-8, you probably should, because there's a lot of interesting things happening on this whole SEC K-8 part that talks about this organization attested to they're not doing these things, or maybe they are, right? So yeah, SEC, financial institutions, and publicly traded companies.
It gets real. There's jail time starting to get associated with some of this stuff. This willful negligence. Are you doing what you say you're doing? So when you're even if you're a small business, if you say, "Oh yeah, we protect our customers' data," well, the chances of that happening, of a breach happening, there's nothing we have that they care about. Okay, so what I'm going to tell you is a trick that I use in relatability of risk, right? So you may say, look, this is a plain text PII. It's in violation of our state statutes. We need to make sure we're encrypting this while in transit. And your client just heard blah, 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 blah. Now, if you say a second way, like, look, this file that goes out monthly that you have on your server here, if that server gets hacked, I am obligated to report that PII was stolen unless we can prove otherwise. When that happens, those little blurbs in the newspaper, so and so was hacked, breached by vendor. That's going to be your name. That's going to be your MSP on there, not the client. Now, if as an MSP, I can say, look, I told them that they need to do this. Now the client knows this is a breach. This is a liability they have. And if one hack happens, then their name is going to be in the newspaper. Kennel Inn or whoever it is the client is. This school has a cybersecurity breach, and all these kids' information was leaked to the public. That's a big black eye you don't want to deal with. And hey, it's only going to cost $300 to mitigate this. Let me get the mitigation in place. I didn't tell them what I'm doing. I didn't tell them all the security and all the pieces to it. I just said, look, there's this problem. I can take care of it. It's going to cost X dollars. Here's the bad stuff that'll happen. If this server gets hacked, if this thing happens, if any of these 20 things happen, then you're going to end up in the papers. And I just need you to be aware. Now, if you want to accept this risk, I need you to sign this piece of paper right here. Just know that when this happens, I'm throwing you under the bus.
Exactly. Will you let me share real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So since it came up, go ahead and add that to the stage. So Health and Human Services maintains a list of breach notifications. I just picked New Hampshire from the list, And the number of New Hampshire organizations that have had breaches in in the last couple of years, right? I think it's 24 months this goes back, right? 200 records, 19,000 records, 10,000 records, 4,000, and on. And I just picked New Hampshire out of the breach, out of the list, right? And so you can pull that down now. The point is, you probably don't want to wind up on that list, and nor does your customer, right? And so, you know, putting in those protections in place to help mitigate getting on those lists. You mentioned, and there's a comment in chat, small businesses on non-regulated. Yeah, there we go, David. Thank you so much, David, for this, because I love this question, right? Because we see this a lot as a compliance company, like the MSPs that we help serve. Well, I've only got one HIPAA client out of my 300. Okay, let's level set. First and foremost, I don't care what framework, just pick on the 5 or 6 cyber liability insurance pieces.
Yep.
It's good business practice, period. It's not a framework, it's not a regulation, but it's good business practice to have backups, have 2FA, antivirus, training, blah, blah, all the things, right? It's just good business practice. And trying to sell that to your customer, I get it. It can be hard. Like, I don't need to deal with that. I don't want to spend the money, is usually what we end up hearing from our MSPs partners, is that their customer doesn't want to spend the money. And what ends up boiling down to is spend a few $100 a month now or spend a few $1 million later, right? The average cost of a medical record, I think, is around $3. Don't quote me, but I think it's around $3. All right, in this instance that I just showed here on HHS, multiply 19,000 records by $3. Not to mention the reputation and all the other factors that go into it. I'm not saying this because of selling on FUD, selling on fact, right? And the fact is, putting in just the 5 or 6 insurance pieces is good business practice, right? So David, to answer that question on the very small business, these are things you're probably already doing in your MSP, right? You're probably already doing backups. You're probably already doing vulnerability. You're, having that conversation. Yeah, it can be hard, but the reality is, if we can save them, I don't know, a couple $1,000 a year on their liability insurance, then that savings can go towards implementing these things, right? It's a cost shift. I either spend $1 zillion on my insurance policy, or I spend half a zillion and move that money to better protect us as a business and our clients.
And I'll also say, David, humanize the conversation.
Yeah.
Make it relatable. So this is let's say you had a small mom and pop flower shop. There's like 1, maybe 2 people working at this shop, and they can't afford, a $300 mitigation, let alone a $3,000 mitigation.
Yep.
What you can do is say, hey, look, you have this liability here. I know you can't afford a big solution. Here's what I would like to do instead. I would like to get CrowdStrike or something. It's going to cost you $10 a month. And it's going to help us do a lot of this, because you only have one PC we're really worried about. That's not going to be very expensive, but because you have data on here that you need to worry about, let's do this one little tiny mitigation to help you and make sure that is backed up. You
Adam,
are a technology person. You are very smart. And so find a solution that fits their budget. That's how you humanize it. Don't sell them the $10,000 pen test for a small flower shop. Sell them the $10 solution that does 90% of the work. Mitigate the risk, and then defer the rest or transfer the rest with a cybersecurity insurance policy. Work with them and understand them.
As we're sitting here, like, I'm not a math genius, and being dyslexic, numbers kind of mess with my brain. But I'm wondering, we should do another session and literally pull up an Excel document and build out a MSP stack for cyber insurance, plugging in a couple of tools, the math, and getting to the math of, like, okay, David, small business X, Y, and Z. we've done the math. Here's what it looks like. It's going to cost you pennies on the dollar
Yep.
when you look at the cost of a breach, right? And we should do a session on that. Just literally pull up Excel, go through it, blah, blah, blah. Like that would be
A
fun.
working session on the on the cash flow.
Well, not even that. I mean, like, what does an average breach cost? X. I don't know, $100,000, whatever.
Yep.
Pulling a number up. But I think that would be a really great session for us to walk through.
Yeah, and sometimes you just don't know. And again, like pulling up that website, that if you look in the comments, everyone, we put it down there so that it's available for you to see. Click on the link down there, bookmark that. That's a great way to show like this stuff happens right next to you. This happens in a place that
Right.
matters. This isn't somebody else's problem. When you have a breach, no one really hears about it except for the media. And if they get a hold of it, then it becomes noisy. But this stuff happens regularly. So what we have
And
to
they
do is show that this is a viable problem that they should care about, and then come up with a solution that works in their budget so that they feel heard. And you that's the big thing, is like with compliance and security, getting your customer to buy in on it is they need to feel heard. Like, look, I don't have $10,000. I can't, do I have another option? And you as a technology person need to work within those parameters to say, well, if you can't mitigate this, I'm sorry, you can't process payment cards.
Mhm.
It's just the rules.
Right. And that goes all the way back to the MSA, right? We worked, I say we, when I was at the MSP, worked directly with Brad Gross to redo all of our MSAs. And a vast majority of the MSA basically said, we are not doing anything except for the four things outlined in this particular statement of work, in this particular thing, right? Because then that is what we are held accountable to, right? That is what, when the rubber hits the road, what we are responsible, because we said we're only doing these things. And I get it. It's a hard decision when I have to tell a customer, listen, this isn't a good risk for us as a company. This isn't a good risk for us as an MSP. We could probably refer you to somebody else, but for us, our business decision, we really want to help protect you, help secure you, help build that defensibility when stuff hits the fan. This is how we operate. And if you're not able to work within our parameters, maybe it's not a right fit. We'd love to help you, but these are our minimums. You need backup, you need 2FA, you need vulnerability, you need security training, you need these 5 or 6 simple things. And you know what? You do have to pay for it, unfortunately.
Yeah. And this is where best practices come into play. Skip and I used to get hit up all the time. What's the best practices in an MSP? Like what should I be doing? I'm like, do you follow NIST? I mean, it's literally lays it out for you. What are the best practices for me to be doing for my customer? And so this brings us on to the next part of this conversation is frameworks. A lot of you are not security people. You're security minded, and you're trying your best to get your customers secure. There's not an IT person I know that doesn't have some kind of security in their head at all times. But a framework ensures that you're at least following some best practices and that you're being consistent across the board, even in areas that maybe aren't your strength. So, Tim, can you tell us a little bit about like a 2-minute explanation of how many frameworks do you support, like at Compliance Scorecard? Not just NIST, not just CMMC. What is it that Compliance Scorecard is going to help an engineer understand so that they're consistent? Because not every framework is the same. Not every customer needs the same level. So, can you give us a little breakdown of frameworks and resulting projects and what this means?
Sure. And I generally don't like to talk about us Compliance Scorecard when we're doing these things, but I guess you teed me up.
Shameless
right?
plug. Shameless plug. Come on, man.
You teed me up. So first and foremost, we are framework agnostic, right? But we do strongly believe in the ability to follow a framework. And I'm going to go on a limb here. Can we just rename it to roadmap instead of framework? Framework feels, but roadmap, like Now I have guardrails. Now I have a path to follow. Now I know where to go. I know the speed bumps. I know the speed limit. I have a roadmap. So I don't know. Can we rename frameworks to roadmap? Yeah, that'll probably
Yeah.
get too many comments. But if I think of a framework like a roadmap, and I know what the guardrails are, and I know where the road turns and forks and splits, and I know the speed limit, and I know there's probably going to be a cop somewhere along there and pulls me over for a broken taillight and realizes I don't have a seatbelt and realize like a a framework, and there are way too many, at least in the United States, and we haven't even talked about privacy frameworks. There are way too many. And
Yeah.
so we strongly suggest that MSPs at least start with the cyber insurance framework or the cyber liability insurance framework that I think our good friends at Fifth Wall are trying to coin, which is, the 5 or 6 things: vulnerability scanning, security awareness training, next gen AV, 2-factor, and backups. Even if you don't go to the big, scary NIST 853 and you just start with those 5 things. However, those that are in a regulated space,
Yep.
HIPAA just came out with a new version. NIST just came out with a new version. CMMC has been all the rage, 800-171. There are actual applicable frameworks. FTC, and despite what you might think, it's not just car dealers anymore. So as an MSP, I don't care what framework you follow.
Pick one.
Pick one. Start today. Start somewhere.
Start on
CIS
your own MSP, as Tim said. Do your own MSP first.
and CIS seems to be the one that bubbles to the top. We love CIS because not only is it iterative, but it's actually a roadmap. What do you have? Where is it? Who can touch it? How are you protected? It's literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And
Yep.
so in Compliance Scorecard, we walk you through that process as easily and as effective as we can. And it doesn't matter what framework. We have dozens. And by the way, you can create your own. We have seen some of our MSPs pull pieces of others together to kind of tailor their gap analysis, their roadmap specifically to their business because it aligns with their MSA and the practices they're actually doing. And so I don't care what framework, get on the road, grab your roadmap, know your guardrails, follow the speed limit, but watch out. The cops might be hidden behind that sign.
Yeah, we got some questions coming up here for you, Tim. And I just want to make sure you know that the beauty of a compliance initiative. So if you stick with, pick your flavor, right? The one that you like. Maybe you've been through it before, so you're familiar with it. Is that now you can tell your client, hey, per NIST standards, per CIS standards, this is where you need to be. And being able to say that a third party is making these recommendations, not us. I'm just trying to follow best practices here. A
Yep.
third party saying, I'm not just trying to make money off you. I'm trying to help you stay above water. And that adds validity. So like in the Humanize project roadmap, we'll say like, if you've got a product like a new firewall deployment, is this going to help cover some of those compliance initiatives? So when you're working with Compliance Scorecard, like, hey, you put this new asset in place, it's going to help with these 5 control families. These things you kind of get to go, and they're going to make more sense. So your client understands that by doing this, not only am I improving my internet speed, but I'm also covering these needs. And your client can feel more comfortable as they grow, and they can be risk averse. They can get rid of that risk. They can transfer that risk. They can mitigate that risk because compliance is helping them on the roadmap. And you can have that roadmap of success. You start here, and we're going to get to compliance. We're going to get to the place we need to be over time. So let's get to some of these questions here. Richard asked, is there somewhere we can find average cyber costs relative to what the client has or does not have implemented, and how adding those additional security services would impact or reduce cyber insurance costs?
Richard, great question. Whew. little bit of a mouthful, but great question, Richard. So, first and foremost, I am not a cyber insurance expert. We refer our MSP friends and partners and IT professionals over to Fifth Wall Solutions, right? Because they are the experts. Number two, I am legally cannot talk about cyber insurance specifics because I am not a legal broker. So we can talk in generalized terms, right? And I'm walking through a few of our MSPs in our compliance scorecard peer group right now to determine costs. And I'll do this at a wicked high level. So, first and foremost, this first step that I have some of our MSPs as part of our peer group. Number one, pull out an Excel document and pull out your credit card statement and literally write down in that Excel document everything you pay for. Everything. Do you pay for LinkedIn? Do you pay for a video editor? Do you pay for, I don't know, tissues? Everything that you do, that you charge, that your company gets billed for. Start there. Inventory everything that you have. Determine what your staff costs are. Include the fringe, the overhead, all that fun stuff. Write a giant list and take all those numbers and start with facts and data.
Yep.
And then from there, you'll know what your costs are. You'll know how to then build out packaging and pricing around the services that you sell and how you, and the long story short is at some point during this process of determining how to package, how to price, how to sell, and the costs associated with. And then you can go to our friends at Fifth Wall and be like, hey, what's the average insurance? Ask our friends over there. And now you can start to compare, like, my customer spends $100 a month. They're getting these kinds of services that will mitigate the cyber insurance at least. And they can see on average a savings of X by doing this. Yep. So Fifth Wall, Will, Reed, all of them over there, they're going to have that data, but you need to start with your own. What does it cost to deliver services? And you may have already done that, but I long-winded way of saying, as the compliance guy would say, it depends.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to calculate because one of the major problems is every business runs different, right?
Yep.
So the impact to them, and that's where you try to put yourself in their shoes. If their client list got stolen, what would the impact to them? If this is a mom and pop, a 2-person shop, it's a lot easier to calculate. When you've got a 500-person shop that you're helping, the costs go way up.
Well, it's an economy of scale factor,
Yep.
right? It's a math problem, right? It's still the same. It's still just a math problem. I'll give you a little little story here. So a couple of Julys ago, maybe you all know what I'm talking about. One of the local veterinary clinics here in near me that we bring our dog to was part of a giant global affected ransomware kind of encryption event. You probably have seen or heard about the wins of that or not, but doesn't matter. I'm not going to call it out. You all know what I'm talking about. Mom and pop veterinary practice. 8 or 10 staff. They've been around 30 years. Great employees. Everybody loved them. Everything became encrypted because of this incident. Well, they lost 30 years of history. They lost, like, they had no idea appointment scheduling. They had no idea of the history of my dog. So when my dog came in sick, they had no idea because all that data was gone. They had to resort to like Gmail and other like quick break fix stuff. The point that I'm trying to make is that if they had a few things in place, maybe immutable separate backups outside of the ecosystem, they could have at least restored to some point in time and gotten the ability to keep their business running, right? So
Yep.
As an MSP, even simple things like backup, right? And it's not hard to be able to sell the concept of backup to a customer.
Backups are easy.
Well, it's not, I mean, they're not, it's not terribly, expensive. And being able to restore to a point in time because you have a completely segregated set of data to get the business back up and running. Like they had dogs and cats and animals showing up on their doorstep, waiting for their appointments, and they had no idea the history of that poor dog or poor cat.
Yeah.
Wrong address. We're a compliance scorecard now, Adam.
Oh, sorry.
Compliancescorecard.com.
I've been with you. I've been with you too long. Go ahead and put it.
It'll redirect now. I got all that redirection working last night.
Yeah, I'm like this is. I thought he switched the website. I'm going to delete that comment. It never happened, Tim. That's a great thing about the internet. I can make it so it never happens.
Perfect.
Yeah. So there's two things. There's your findings in compliance, which is you can go through the NIST workbook. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and it'll take you a few days to go through. Right? It's complicated. But then there's managing the compliance over time. And that is where I need an entire department to help me, or a nice tool like Compliance Scorecard. Shameless plug. But the idea here is that you can help your client understand. And there's no magic bullet to say, here's a template, throw this PDF at your client, and they'll 100% be on board with understanding how they need to be compliant. And they're going to say, yes, I need to adopt this entire framework because this PDF explained everything. No, you have to have a relationship with the client. You have to show them how this is going to fit into their bigger goals. We talk to our clients all the time about your flower shop, your doctor's office. These people they're trying to balance out income, cash flow. They're trying to figure out when they need to order from their supply chain, and there's been a hiccup there. They've got all these projects that they're balancing out. IT is just one part of it. And so creating that roadmap of success, or say, hey, look, after you have Mother's Day, you're going to have a lot of income from those flowers you bought. Let's go ahead and get this part done so that you can sell more on the next holiday, and you're going to do it more securely and handle more online transactions. So back in, like, what was it, 2007, when ESSL became a big thing, right? When you get that nice green bar across the top of your screen, that was a big thing. Is that, hey, your customers could come in and they can see the green link there, and now they're going to have a higher confidence in buying. That was a great thing. I loved that because it wasn't hard to do, and it was something it was like a couple bucks extra to get the extended SSL.
It built trust. As the flower shop, it built trust. And I can't tell you how many like mom and pop websites. I mean, I've been building, as you all know, I've been building websites since the early 90s. I still, as a little side gig, manage several hundred websites, and help small businesses in our area with, their websites. And every single one of them wants some kind of badge on their website that says we are safe and secure.
Yep.
Yeah, we go through a process to make sure that the badge is actually legitimate, that there's stuff behind that. But even to this day, out of all of the customers that I manage websites for, they want some kind of proof that they are doing a thing to protect their customers.
Yep.
Right? And they should be doing that without willful ignorance or willful neglect.
Yeah.
because I put a badge on my website doesn't necessarily mean that I'm doing the things.
Yes.
And it is going to open them up for way more risk when the customer says, well, your website said it was safe and secure, and now you've been breached, or you've had an incident. I hate to use the word breach, but that willful negligence or willful ignorance doesn't come into play anymore because your website had a little badge on it that said, look at me, I'm safe and secure. We always advise, or I always advise my web clients, don't do that unless you have a way to prove it.
Yep. Yeah. If you have the SOC 2, get that type 2. If you have a way to show that your evidence is being gathered and held accountable, which we do, like if you look at our SOC 2, we have a way of showing that we are held accountable and that we are doing what we say so that you can feel secure in your liability. So you want to do that with your clients. Do this really well. And I guarantee you, unless you've been through a compliance audit before, there's a lot you don't know. And it's more than just encrypting and securing. There is a huge process to it. So there's business risk analysis to do. And this all comes down to, you have to talk to your client. There is no automated way of doing this. There never will be. There's always a human element to compliance. because that's our biggest risk. You guys say it all the time. If we could just get rid of the humans, we could be secure. But then at the same time, people come back to me all the time and say, how do I automate all of this so I don't have to talk to the client? I just want to send them a report. Like, you're the human. You have to have a relationship with this client so that they'll care about security. If you're just sending them PDFs and sending them these little automated reports, they're not going to care. You need to have a visible scorecard. You can say, hey, look, this is where you're scoring. This is why. Now, I've been working with you guys for a couple years, and here's an asset I think we could easily protect using some very simple tools, and it can completely make this go away. It's going to take away 90% of your risk. And it's going to make this scorecard increase. Now, people love visuals. They love seeing that score go up. And so having the visual of like a scorecard of some kind, and then also having the conversation with the client, this is how it relates to your business, and here's how we're going to help you. Yes, we could sell you the $10,000 solution, but we're not. We're just going to do this thing, and it's going to meet all the metrics, and then we can prove that it's going to help you by doing like a little test once a quarter. And here's what it costs. And you can sleep better at night knowing that your insurance company is going to cover you if things get stolen. But the chances are it's not going to get stolen because we have these layers in place. And now your client cares. They feel heard, they feel valued, and they'll buy what you're talking about.
So there's a bunch of people listening. Thank you, everybody, for showing up.
There's a ton of people out there being quiet.
Exactly. And I'm going to throw this out there, right? So in the comments, give me a yes or a no or a maybe if you are doing any kind of regular risk review. Once a month, once a quarter, once a year at least. Give me at least a once, a thumbs up, a yes, a no, or a maybe. Are you doing regular reviews with your customer? Whether it's cyber or not, whether it's compliance or not, just tell us in comments, yes, I am doing a review quarterly, or no, but I want to learn how. David, I swear to God, I did not plant David. So very easy to get started with Compliance Scorecard. You can go to our website, compliancescorecard.com. You can join any one of our live weekly demos, except next week we'll be at Right of Boom, so we're not doing one next
Right of Boom.
Or if you're ready to get going, there's literally start here, and you can sign up, go through the process. You'll get in our onboarding, and we'll walk you through all of this stuff. Pretty easy. Compliancescorecard.com. Join the live demo, or literally get started by clicking the button.
Yeah, I know we're wrapping up here, but there's Humanize, when we do these webinars, we try to make them value add. We try to make it so that this is something you care about. The reason why I bring up Compliance Scorecard this year is because 2024 is going to be a year of compliance. We're seeing a lot of legislation changing this year. You need to get ahead of this. You need to help your clients get ahead, because it's not top of mind for them until they start seeing all of these news articles are going to be coming out, and all of this legislative change that says if you are willfully negligent, if your client knows or your MSP knows of the problem and they don't do anything about it, they're uninsurable. They're not going to be insured. You're going to have a hard time getting loans. You're going to have a hard time with finance in your business because you're too high of a risk. The financial industry is tired of being bit by this, of losing money. So your business goes out of business because no one will touch you with a 10-foot pole. Now you can't pay back your loans to your bank. Now you can't do all this stuff, and you have to file bankruptcy. This has bit the financial industry in the butt enough now that they're going to start changing legislation on this, where you are required, and you want to be known as the MSP that brings this to the table. You want to know that you are going to help them. Do you want to share your screen again there, Tim?
I don't care if you want to pull it up. We've got 5 minutes left.
We got
People love scorecards. Yes,
yeah,
we have scorecards. We have a policy scorecard, which basically is, depending on which framework you are doing, there is particular documents that those frameworks require you to have. We have a assessment scorecard, right? So whether you're doing a CMMC engagement, or even just one of our mini risk assessments, or your own predefined assessment, we have scorecards that you can use. And our newest, latest, greatest feature that we're going to be talking about later today with our friends from Connect Secure, Peter Bellini and I, is the asset scorecard. This is completely new, blue ocean. Nobody's doing this, at least as far as I've been able to tell when I look at all of our other vendors that we work with. Asset Scorecard gives you literally the one-click integration to, our multiple integrations. Or if you don't have an integration, no problem. Start with a blank document and walking you through. You can the ability to generate pretty little scorecards or actionable data for you and your customer to be able to fully govern assets. IG 1.1, right? So we look at any framework, any roadmap. What do you have? And does your customer know about it? And does your customer agree to it? And did your customer accept and sign off?
Yep.
We have completely automated that process. Tie in your source of truth, whether it's your PSA, your RMM, your vulnerability, whatever, tie in that source of truth. And we're going to be able to give you quickly, red, yellow, green. Is it a new device? Is it an existing device? Is it a duplicate device? We're going to get into all of this afternoon at 11 o'clock here with our good friend, at 2 o'clock with our friends at Connect Secure. One click, set your integration, set the schedule, and then we will help automate that humanized conversation with your customer to be able to fully govern and attest to your assets, hardware, software, humans, M365, even SaaS app. This is something that hasn't existed in the space because MSPs just aren't doing it because they haven't had the ability to do it or time to do it at scale. And we've solved for that with 2 clicks. I say 2 clicks loosely. It's like 3 or 4 to set up the API. But once the API is set, once a week, once a month, once a quarter, it's literally you review it quickly and let your customer know this is what we know, and your customers can agree or disagree.
Yep. And there's a reason why I had Tim here. Like they're doing it so well that we're forming an integration with them because there is so much more to this. Creating something from scratch is just going to cheat everyone. Tim is doing this the best of anybody in the industry. I've been doing compliance and security for a long time, and I wish I had this tool 10 years ago. So, Tim, I don't know why you can't go back in time and give it to me when I was working major corporate stuff. But
it's because I wrote it for myself, and it wasn't multi-tenant, and it was only for me.
Yeah, it's a huge time saver. It's a huge revenue generator, and it's going to make your clients happy. You can't get much better than that. That's why we're integrating with it. So when you talk about your QBRs or QRRs, you can just put in compliance as part of it. Like, hey, if you're using us for compliance, we'll also report on this during your quarterlies. And now your client is so much happier because all this is happening. It's streamlined, it's easy, but it's holding everybody accountable, including the MSP and the client. Now the client knows, like, if you're not doing 2-factor, violation, it's big red flag. And you're not doing TLS, you're not doing encryption, violation, big red flag. Now you can sell the services that are going to solve these compliance initiatives so that you can sleep better at night. So you're not going to be the MSP who's thrown under the bus when your client gets breached. That you won't become the vendor that makes the headlines like third-party vendor causes breach at, local bank. You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be that girl. You want to be the person who says, we stopped this or we got ahead of it really quickly because we had all these things in place and we had identified it ahead of time. And now everybody's much happier.
Awesome. And I'll drop the link to the webinar this afternoon where we're going to dive deeper into asset stuff. So because we had a little bit of feedback there.
That's all right. And like and subscribe both our pages. Tim does some great stuff. He regularly posts content on compliance, regularly gives advice that is meaningful. Please go through and like and subscribe to his page. Like and subscribe to our page if you like these kinds of webinars. We host them free. We try to be as agnostic as possible. But when we have great tools like Tim's, we try to promote it and say, hey, look, this is going to make your life easier. It's going to make it better. We like working with Tim. We want you to work with Tim too. If you want a demo of the Humanize IT product, feel free to come and click the demo at our site. We also have a free trial. You can check us out for 30 days for free. No one's going to get charged. And you can focus on your clients. We're going to make things streamlined and much easier. So, Tim.
And for those of you that are going to Right of Boom next week, stop by both of our booths.
Yes.
We have new t-shirts. Yeah, I know t-shirts, but they're soft and they literally just came in yesterday. So we look forward to seeing everybody that is going to Right of Boom next week. Stop by both of our booths. As Adam said, do the like and the subscribe thing. And I look forward to seeing you all next week. Questions, comments, concerns, whatever, my DMs are open. I'd love to be able to help your MSP level up your compliance efforts and streamline that process for you and your customers.
Thank you, Tim, for being on. I hope you have on again.
See you soon.